Welcome back to TalkBacks, where Petty meets perfect revenge. In today's episode, we start with a girl who was told she was too emotional for science until she destroyed her teacher's ego at a national competition. But we're just warming up. Next, a loyal employee gives up her weekends chasing a promised promotion, only to see the job handed to her boss's nephew. What she does next? Pure career karma. And finally, what would you do if your sister stole your fiancé? Let's just say, this bride didn't walk away with a husband, she walked away with a public scandal and one unforgettable message. Let's get into it. Some insults don't hit you all at once. Some settle in your chest like smoke, silent, lingering, waiting to ignite something deeper. I was 16 when my chemistry teacher, Mrs. Langford, told me that science wasn't really a girl's game, at least not for girls like me. Her exact words: "You're too emotional? You take everything personally. You won't last a week in a lab." She said it casually, almost like a joke. But no one laughed. Just a few sideways glances, the kind that let you know your place in the room had been decided, and it wasn't near the Bunsen burner. I wasn't even a bad student. I asked questions, took neat notes, stayed after class when I didn't understand molecular orbitals. But I wasn't the cold, quiet type she clearly preferred, the boys who slouched back and mumbled answers like they were born understanding formulas. Every time I spoke up, she'd sigh. Every time I made a mistake, she'd tilt her head and say things like, "See, that's what happens when you rush in." One day during lab, I panicked over a small spill. Sodium hydroxide hit the counter. I froze and said, "I don't know what to do." Her response: "Maybe you should try English class instead. You're clearly better with drama than data." The entire room laughed. That night I cried. Not because of the insult, but because I actually started to believe her. What if I wasn't made for science? What if this wasn't for people like me? Then I remembered something my mom had once told me. If someone calls you too emotional, they're usually scared of what you'll do when you feel everything and still choose to fight. So I fought, quietly and with focus. There was a national science fair coming up, backed by the state STEM initiative. It was open to all high school students, but participation required a sponsor teacher. Mrs. Langford wouldn't sign my form. "I just don't think it's worth your time," she said. "You need discipline and composure for that level of competition." I went to the vice principal instead. Explained everything. He wasn't warm, but he signed it. My project was called Photonic Polymers and Energy Absorption, a model for smart windows. Yeah, it was real. And yes, I did the whole thing myself, including building the light modulation panel using recycled LCD screens and a custom coded Arduino loop. For 2 months, I lived and breathed that setup. I learned to solder. I burned my hand once. I failed 8 prototypes. I didn't stop. The day of the regional qualifier, I carried my whole panel setup into the exhibit hall while other schools arrived with rolling carts, sponsor teachers, and matching T-shirts. I stood there alone, adjusting a bent wire with shaking hands, when Mrs. Langford walked past me. She didn't smile, just said, "Didn't realize you were still trying to prove something?" I didn't respond. The judges came. They stayed longer than anyone else at my table. Asked detailed questions. Took photos. One of them whispered, "This is beyond high school level." A week later, I got the email. Find list. National round. Travel stipend included. When the announcement was posted in the school hallway, it had my name printed in bold. Under sponsoring teacher, it just said Vice Principal Jameson. Mrs. Langford never said a word, but I noticed she stopped calling on me in class. Stopped making eye contact. The national fair was in DC. I didn't win first place, but I placed third in a pool of nearly 200 national finalists. I got a $10,000 scholarship and a letter of recommendation from 2 STEM board judges. When I came back, the school sent out a newsletter with photos. The principal shook my hand at assembly. But it was a different moment I'll never forget. A few weeks later, as I was packing up for the semester, I got called into the front office. Mrs. Langford was there, alone. She looked at me and said, flatly, "I didn't expect that from you." I smiled and said, "That's okay. I didn't need you to." Then I walked out. Some people try to measure intelligence by who stays calm. But sometimes, the smartest thing you can do is burn with purpose and let your results speak louder than their approval. That was just the beginning. Because sometimes being underestimated doesn't just hurt, it fuels something far more dangerous. And in a gray, walled office 2 towns away, someone else was about to realize. You don't play with someone's ambition and expect to stay in charge. There's a special kind of betrayal that comes not with shouting or slamming doors, but with a handshake and a maybe next time. I was 27, 3 years into my role as an operations analyst for a mid-sized logistics firm. Nothing glamorous, but I was good at it. Efficient, organized, and frankly the only one who gave a damn about keeping our internal systems from collapsing under their own weight. My manager, Greg, had been in his role for 8 years. The kind of guy who showed up late, forwarded emails instead of answering them, and got very nervous anytime corporate showed interest in performance visibility. That's where I came in. I built custom dashboards, streamlined reports, and started catching things our accounting team had missed for months. Greg noticed. But instead of praising me publicly, he pulled me aside one Friday evening and said, "Listen, you're good. But if you want to move up, you'll need to show your leadership material. That means sacrifice, weekends, high visibility projects. You in." I was young, hungry, so I said yes. For the next 4 months, I became a ghost. My Saturdays disappeared into budget reconciliation and logistics modeling. I restructured a failing vendor contract that saved us $120,000 a year. I implemented a new KPI dashboard that our regional VP started quoting in his meetings. Greg, he took every chart, every deck, and slapped his name on it. I didn't care, not at first, because I believed what he said. Then came the job posting, senior operations lead, internal applicants encouraged. It was Greg's old role, being moved up as part of a department expansion. I was the obvious choice. He told me casually, "Don't worry, this is basically your job to lose. Just keep your head down and let the process work." So I submitted my application, gave a stellar panel interview, walked through a multi-year optimization plan. Then I waited 1 week, 2 weeks. Then came the email. "Thank you for applying. After careful consideration, we have selected a candidate whose background more closely aligns with the department's evolving needs." The new hire, Greg's 24-year-old nephew, fresh out of college, no logistics experience. I went numb, then furious, then strategic, because I hadn't just been working, I had been archiving. Every email Greg forwarded to me with the subject line, "Can you handle this?" Every file I created, every Slack message where he said, "Great work, mind if I present this under my name to keep things clean?" I compiled it all. A 78-slide deck titled, "Leadership in Action, Attribution, Execution, and Internal Ethics Violations in OPS Department." I didn't send it to HR, I sent it to the regional VP, the one who'd been quoting my dashboards in meetings. I also included version histories, project metadata, and calendar logs. I didn't accuse Greg of theft. I just laid out a timeline. 3 days later, Greg called in sick. The day after that, his nephew's offer was rescinded due to internal restructuring. I was called in by HR, where they asked if I'd be willing to stay, with a promotion and a 20% raise. I didn't smile. I just said, "As long as my name goes on my work from now on, we have a deal." They never said what happened to Greg. Rumor is he took an early retirement. All I know is, his old office now has my nameplate on the door, and I make damn sure no one ever gets erased the way I almost did. Some betrayals are silent. But silence doesn't mean compliance. Sometimes, it's just the sound of a storm building. And for one bride, to be in white heels and a very guilty conscience. That storm was about to arrive. Just before she said, "I do." There's a special place in hell for people who smile at you while lying through their teeth. My sister, Vanessa, always had a talent for it. She was the golden child, pretty, confident, magnetic. The kind of person who walks into a room and somehow everyone ends up orbiting her. I was the opposite, quiet, academic, the good girl who stayed out of trouble and out of the spotlight. We weren't close, but we weren't enemies. Just different. At least, that's what I thought. I met Eric during grad school. He was smart, sweet, a little shy. We clicked fast. Within 2 years, we were living together. At 3 years, he proposed. I said yes. Vanessa said, "Wow, I didn't think he was your type. He's really hot." I laughed. She always said outrageous things like that. It was part of her personality. I should have listened harder. The first real red flag came 6 months before the wedding. Eric started pulling away, less affectionate, less present. He blamed work. I believed him. Then came the day I was helping Vanessa pick out a dress. She pulled a deep red one off the rack and said, "I don't want to outshine you or anything." I joked, "You're not the bride." She smiled and said, "Not yet." I thought it was just her being weird. Looking back, it was a warning shot. 2 months before the wedding, I caught them. I'd left my phone charging in the kitchen and walked back in to grab something. Eric's phone buzzed. I wasn't a snoop, I never had been. But the message preview said, "I can't stop thinking about last night." From Vanessa. I opened the thread. Dozens of messages, photos, voice notes. Her in my bathrobe. Him saying he wished things were different. Her telling him I was too boring, too cold, too safe. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took screenshots. Then I went to the printer, made copies, and put the originals in a folder labeled Plan B. I didn't call off the wedding. I didn't confront either of them. I made a group chat with our family and friends called Wedding Logistics and played the role of the glowing bride, 2B. I hired a videographer. I updated the seating chart. I bought a new dress. And on the day of the wedding, I smiled through the makeup, posed for pictures, and walked down the aisle like everything was fine. Until the priest said, "If anyone here knows a reason these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now." I raised my hand. Everyone gasped. I walked over to the mic and said, "Actually, I have a message to share. It's from the maid of honor to the groom, about their little rehearsal last weekend." The videographer kept filming. I pulled out the folder and started reading the text out loud. Vanessa turned white. Eric stood frozen. My mother started crying. My father yelled something I didn't catch. I handed the folder to the priest, turned to the guests, and said, "Thank you all for coming. The wedding's off. But please enjoy the catering. I paid for it." Then I walked out. It went viral. Someone posted the video online. Within days, it hit 1 million views. Vanessa lost most of her friends. Eric moved away. I changed my number, finished grad school, and started a new life. One where I never had to see either of them again. Because some people mistake kindness for weakness, and silence for surrender. But sometimes, silence is just the sound of a match being struck. And betrayal is the fuel? Friends, thanks for tuning into this episode of the ProRevenge series here on TalkBacks. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another revenge story. See you next time.